Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for today's session. I'm Allie Leidy, and I am privileged to be the Chief Operating and Strategy Officer with the New York State Network for Youth Success. And we are so pleased to have you participating in today's session in our sustainability series, Approaching Foundations and Building Relationships with Funders. I want to give a quick overview of who we are and what we do. We are the New York State affiliate for the National After School Association. We are one of 50 state after-school networks working in conjunction with the National After School Alliance. We are the backbone agency for the New York State Community Schools Network. And we are the New York State lead for the National Girls Collaborative Project, working to increase equity in STEAM programming. Everything we do is to increase access to high-quality programs outside of the traditional classroom. We have 15 regional networks across the state to better connect locally with programs. We also have a number of resources that are available to you. I'm going to put a link in to the chat in just a moment to share where you can access all of these things. We have a page on the American Rescue Plan and a lot of resources on finding community partners, a guidebook on working with community partners, information on starting an after-school program and assessing the quality of your program. We also do credentialing and accreditation, as well as health and safety training and training for site leaders. I mentioned already that we have 15 regional networks that you can get connected with in your local areas. We also run a free job posting site, afterschoolpathfinder.org. And this is not our only training series. We are also running a training series on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion that is all free and online in this format. I, again, will share this full resource list in the chat with you momentarily, but we do hope that you'll stay connected, get signed up for our listserv if you haven't already, find us on Facebook and Twitter. We are a membership organization, so you can become a member. One of our newest benefits to membership is access to an employee assistance program that gives you free mental health sessions, discounts on things like gym memberships, financial services, all kinds of wonderful benefits. So you can check that out. And there's more information on our Jedi series and sustainability series here. Today's workshop is Approaching Foundations and Building Relationships with Funders. And we are so pleased to have a wonderful moderator, Jay Roskup, who's been moderating these sessions for us, as well as an expert panel from many different foundations and with a lot of experience from across the state. We are so pleased to have them all. So I am going to turn it over to Jay to introduce today's panel.
Well, thank you very much, Allie. I really appreciate that. And, you know, we have Esther and Ann and Michelle and Polly with us, and that brings us a range of national and regional foundations and a range of experiences and expertise. And we're really going to just turn to them right away to ask them to share about themselves and to share about their foundations. Now, Allie, you do a great job explaining. Can you tell people how they can manage their view on the screen for Zoom so that they want to see the highlighted speakers?
Yes, you can click the view in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and select speaker view, and all of our speakers today will be spotlighted for you on your screen together.
And we are really hoping to have just a conversation, and we hope that you'll feel like you're listening in on a conversation with each of us here. That said, this conversation is for you. So if somebody says something and you have a question, please put that right into chat. Allie and I will both be monitoring the chat. And we really want you to leave today knowing that there are a lot of people and a lot of institutions looking for ways to help helpers. So thank you for making time to be with us today. And with that, I'm going to ask if Polly would lead off and introduce both yourself, please, and your foundation.
Happy to. Hi, Jay. Hi, Allie. I just want to also thank you both for leading these sessions and doing such fantastic work. on behalf of the state and all of the young people, the workers, and just the citizens of the state. So all of the people who live here. So tremendously grateful to be on this panel as well with my my fellow philanthropists, if I could say that. So my name is Singh. I'm a senior program officer at the Wallace Foundation. Wallace was endowed by the founders of the Reader's Digest magazines. For those of you who don't know, DeWitt and Lila Wallace were passionate philanthropists. They funded primarily in arts and education. And there were these leftover grants that were in youth development, community development, and you may find their name on placards at museums and other places that you visit. So now we have the Wallace Foundation, and I will answer the question in terms of how foundations are different in terms of philanthropy. We really are along a continuum, right? It's not a monolithic group when you think about philanthropy and what they are. Some of them have living donors. Some of them are completely independent, like Wallace. So our donors are no longer alive, and they have created an endowment from which we draw down and give out about 5%. That's in line with the tax codes and those kinds of things. So along a continuum, funding can be directed at specific areas. At Wallace, we focus on education, arts, and out of school time. We call it learning and enrichment. So it's typically summer after school programming and those kinds of things. And Jay, I have the privilege of being, Jay is my grantee, and I have the privilege of working with him, and I'm really excited about that. But my fellow panelists are representing different philanthropies. Wallace funds nationally, we fund initiatives. So we'll be funding Jay, but we'll also, Jay and his organization, in partnership with his regional, with a number of regional organizations that he convenes. In addition to supporting Jay, we're also supporting a research, an evidence, to collect evidence in terms of what has Jay been doing to really understand his implementation, how he forms his partnerships and those kinds of things. So there are those kinds of ways that foundation work. And the purpose of our work is to learn from the sector, learn from people who are in direct service, elevate lessons from their work by commissioning research from their work, and have them and promote their work and talk about their efforts. We can't fund everyone, but what we can do is highlight good work happening in the sector, making a difference, building an evidence base so that others can learn from each other and communicate those lessons very, very intentionally. And that is how Wallace really sees a both and in terms of building a sector within which we fund, but knowing that we can't fund everyone, but we can share lessons from what we're learning. And other funders, you'll find local, regional, and a number of different funders with different ways of how they engage. Some funders give funds and you never hear from them. They don't check back. Some funders give funds and you hear from them on a regular basis. You speak to them on a regular. So that's the continuum when you think of funders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Esther, could you introduce yourself and your foundation?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Ali, and thank you all of you who did not find it robbery to join us today. And to my colleagues on the panel, you all are amazing. We all have space to take, and we do it collaboratively. And this is one of those times where we do come together to share our side of the story to allow us to work collaboratively together. My name is Esther Annan. I'm the program officer from the John R. Oishei Foundation, which is a private place-based foundation in Western New York. And we have 5 categories that we support currently in our strategy planning, which includes education, building self-sufficiency, building stable neighborhoods, health and improving systems of care, as well as the arts. Having a background in social work, my particular space here at the foundation is around the health and human services space. We also have a beyond grant making department that allows us to seek and build capacity of not-for-profits to serve our community. We are very proud, along with our partners, to be influential and be a good force in the Buffalo and Niagara region. And to some of Polly's points, you know, Mr. John R. Oishei silently gave in the space of health and education anonymously, and upon his transition, endowed these funds to allow us to be stewards of those funds and allowing mission to drive his assets into continuing his legacy in the community. And so again, in the spaces that we're able to provide resources, although resources are limited, we are able to partner with local funders to always try and show up in a place where we are supporting our community, as well as building people and their capacity to maintain a healthy and good human lifestyle. So again, thank you for the opportunity to just share some of my learnings coming into philanthropy, only being 3 years in. I did join the foundation in June of 2020. The foundation itself was established in this capacity in 1997. So thank you again for the opportunity to just be with you all and share space.
Esther, thank you so much. And Ann, can we ask you to introduce yourself and the foundation that you were working with, and maybe tell that story a little bit?
Hi, my name is Ann Lawrence, and I have worked in adult and youth literacy and funding for over 40 years. The Robert Bowne Foundation, who I did consulting work for many years and developing literacy workshops to help programs develop engaging, fun activities and help young people become lifelong learners. And I really loved the work. And so I ended up applying for the program officer job and worked as the program officer for 13 years. In that job, I brought my experience as a teacher and someone who does professional development and sort of switching my work, the job around. I really felt it was important to support people. So I did, instead of site visits, support visits, where helping programs really think about what is their mission, what are their values, and what is it that they want to do, and to set some goals and action plans to work through those. And each meeting we would talk and bring staff together to talk about it, so they had a better understanding. The foundation started After School Matters, the journal, which I'm still on the editorial board. We had research grants because we felt, as the Wallace Foundation, that it was really important to document the good work that folks did. By the way, I got a Wallace grant back in 1996. It was expanding capacity in ESOL, and they were wonderful. It was a 2-year grant to work with 5 adult ed programs. And I got to document it and everything. So working with Wallace was wonderful. And that's one of the things I brought to my job as a program officer. I had applied for many grants. So I knew it from both the side of the grantee and also as the grantor. I think we funded over, usually we had 40 or 50 grantees at a time. And we really tried to develop relationships with them. So they began to feel that we were not testing them or evaluating them, but that we were helping them become a better program. And also in that was helping them understand that in their proposals, they needed to think about what is it they actually do, so that when I visited the program, I'd say, you don't have any of this wonderful work in your proposal. So we worked with them on many different levels. Organizationally, we offer technical assistance in board development, in infrastructure, human resources, and finally, most importantly, programmatic. So and now I'm, the foundation closed in 2015, and on one of the resources you'll see where you can actually read about and have some of the resources from the foundation that closed in 2015.
Thank you, Ann. And we're going to come back to you, Ann, to ask more about that expertise from both sides of the aisle in just a minute. Michelle, can you introduce yourself and the foundation you work with?
Sure. Hi, my name is Michelle Shafer, and I work at ESL Federal Credit Union. We are part of a 6-county region, so Monroe, Orleans, Genesee, Livingston, Ontario, and Wayne. And as a federal credit union, we wanted to be a purpose-driven organization and embarked a handful of years ago on creating a strategic framework on how to be more equitable, a stronger community partner, and overall help our community thrive and prosper. And so our foundation is 100 years old, just like our credit union. We were started by Eastman Kodak as an Eastman Savings and Loan organization to help Kodak employees by obtain mortgages and have housing. But then in the 90s, when Kodak and the Eastman Savings and Loan separated, we became a federal credit union. And in that spirit, so we're a nonprofit, and our goal loosely was, if we were a for-profit financial institution, we'd have to pay taxes, but we don't. So about what we would pay annually in taxes, we give back to the community, is sort of how our foundation works. So there's no 5% or anything. It's really just about how well the financial institution does. We have 3 funding priority areas. One is a people-based strategy, and that's where I work. It's cradle to career. The second is a place-based strategy, and that is building strong neighborhoods, affordable quality housing of choice in the neighborhood of choice, in the school district of choice. And then the final one is called strengthening organizations and systems, and it supports our people-based and our place-based strategy. And so we know that society's hardest problems are the burden of our nonprofits and our government systems, and we resource them the least. And so how do we strengthen those? And we do all of this under the lens of equity. Rochester is a prosperous place, but not for all. And many of that has been constructed and created by the past systems and the past policies, and discriminatory lending practices that all financial institutions participated in the past, and including ESL. So equity is one lens that we look at. Collaboration and partnership, because if we could have solved all of our problems on our own, we would have done so already, right? We have to work together. And then continuous improvement. And I appreciate your sharing about how it's, sharing with other folks, because we all have to learn together. We all have to fail together. And so that's another one of our pillars.
Well, right now, we are running right on time, which is phenomenal. So we're not failing yet. And we're going to come back to, we're going to talk to Esther and to Polly, have Polly start off with, a lot of us are familiar with state grants and federal grants. And one of the things that we're wanting to hear a little bit about is what's different with a foundation proposal, with a grant to a foundation. So Polly, if you wouldn't mind maybe starting just in general, when people think state grants or federal grants or like some kind of government funding, and then they're coming to you, what's the difference in that setup?
Because so that's a great question. First, we're a national funder, and when we fund, we do have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of the use of the funds, is what I would say is what's the difference between government grants and foundation grants. I think normally if you're under a government grant, based on my own understanding, and panelists, others, please correct me if I misstate anything. My understanding is when you're funded through the government, it's through a legislation. It's through a funded legislation, and you have to meet the parameters of that legislation and its interpretation, right? For a funder, for a philanthropy and a private foundation, you have a little bit of flexibility, right? You have more of a leeway, but you also, as a grantee, have to be savvy about what you're signing up for, right? Read your grant agreements. That's my advice. Read your grant agreements when you receive them from your funder. I do quite a bit of like grant agreement preparation, as well as when my first meeting with a grantee, and Jay and I haven't had our setup yet, but he saw a preview of my grant agreement before I even told him to sign it. And I asked him, read this and tell me if there are any issues or, anything that comes up. So I can, we have the ability to do some editing and some, leveling up so that we know that. And because as a funder, I fund a myriad of grantees, quasi government, wholly nonprofit. We contract with for-profit organizations. So I have a range of, and I've also been doing this for 20 years. So I have a range of organizations that I've worked with. So there is quite a bit of flexibility. I will say that when COVID hit and, it was such a devastating time, we were in the midst of an initiative. And we said, you know what, we're going to release the parameters of our grant. And back then, we were running an initiative. Folks had agreed to do technical assistance, just as Ann described, that she goes in and she coaches and works intentionally with her grantees to prepare them for their capacity building and all of those things that they need or they ask for. And, we were in the midst of doing that and COVID, and then, everyone was sort of like, we were crisis management. And so we said, you know what, use whatever funding you have to meet the needs of your community. That is the priority right now. Put everything else on the back burner. Do what you need to meet the needs, because we're an emergency response. And that's the flexibility we were able to offer as a private philanthropy. My understanding is government does not have that flexibility, right? They have to, they're held to their parameters in a much stricter way. So that I'll stop there. But I also, I'll say one more thing. As a funder, when I review your budget, I'm also looking at who else is funding you. That's the thing that I'll stop there, and I'll turn to Esther to see if she has anything else to add.
Esther, that's a great place to pick up. Keep going on that.
Oh, absolutely. Polly, thank you for the alley-oop, right? So at this point, I think just separating the two is government equals public, private literally means private. And it shows up in two different ways. And the flexibility here is that when you have a government or public grant showing up with a philanthropy, there's a space that philanthropy is looking to fill to help you move that government grant, because it's so restricted in the government side, whereas Polly described how flexible private funding can be. And I think what we have to note that one is not better than the other. It is literally the combination of both to get to you to be able to move your mission of your organization and for the people that you serve. And like Polly, we do look at other funding sources, right? For every grant that comes through, and to be able to understand our public funders' priorities is a big deal in philanthropy too, because those are the spaces that we would like to move our mission in those spaces, because we know, in fact, there's flexibility on our side and there's no flexibility on the other side, give or take, right? And so I think this is where the leveraging of both assets comes into play, and the impact that collaboration has among public, government, and private funding. I think that would be all that I would add to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, there's not enough private philanthropic dollars in the world to solve all the problems. And, And so we too always look for who are the other funders and where are the gaps that we can fill. You know, one of the grants that we have with Wayne Cap is here's the government funding, and there were two pieces that weren't covered under the grant. And so we're able to help fund those pieces to make a program whole, stronger, with more capacity. So completely agree.
And before I return to the next question, Jay, please excuse me.
No,
Also,
you're all right.
when I said give or take, I would like to acknowledge that our government funding partners did indeed become flexible around COVID time, like someone reminded me in the chat. And at the same time, it did have some impact on their ability to be flexible, if you are, if I could say that too. So again, the give and take is really important here. And again, not one is better than the other, or whatever the case may be, but really it's the collaboration among the two funding sources that helps us to do our work together collaboratively.
Well, Ann, I think these guys have probably sold the idea of finding philanthropic dollars and finding foundations that fit their vision and mission. But one of the questions they're going to have is like, great, where do I go to find these grants? And also, when I find one, what is it they're even looking for? Can you start us off on those two questions?
Well, sure. But I just wanted to respond to them. And, Polly brought up the fact that she sends out a draft of the budget, or of the, what is required in the grant. I think, grantees have to understand the importance of being honest and giving a realistic budget. And also, if it isn't going to work, to push back, because then they can't fulfill their grant. It's communication is really important. And so I'm sorry, Jay, what is you were saying, where to find these?
Where do you find, like, if they're looking for the grants, for government grants, you can go to grants.gov.
Yeah.
Or you can go to grant contracts. It's pretty clear, but foundations, there's not, as you all said, if to paraphrase in our prep call, one of you brilliantly said, and take credit for it. You said, if you know one foundation, then you know one foundation. Was that you, Esther? I can't remember who said it, but if you know one foundation, you know one foundation. It was, maybe it was Polly. And that every single interface, but like I can go to grants.gov and it's the same interface, whether I want to apply for DOJ, Department of Ed, STAMHSA, I'm right there, and all those grants are listed, and it's an SF 424 form and all that. But gosh, how do I even, like, I bet many of us on the call didn't even know about at least one, if not two or three of the foundations on this call. So how do we find you all? How do people looking to make a difference find funders that are looking to help people make a difference?
There are quite a few actually resources. Candid, which used to be the Foundation Center, joined up with GuideStar, and they they have a whole library, as well as they do workshops where, I presented about what the Robert Bowne Foundation did and how to apply for a proposal. There's also the Community Resource Center, which is one that not only offers possibilities of finding different foundations, but indeed they also assist you. And that's the other thing all foundations like to see, is that you are constantly working on improving what you are doing in your program and meeting the community needs. So you can begin to, think about it. But there are, like, for instance, I know, Allie's organization has a list of, current government funding. I also really, in my job as a program officer, I try to network with as many foundations as possible so that I could make recommendations. So you can ask your other, foundations that you work with, do you have any recommendations for who I might apply to? And indeed, it's Googling, you can Google almost anything now. And that's one of the things that I finally learned about. I'm not much of a techie, but it's you can find out other resources just through doing that, who you might apply to. But I want to say that you need to go beyond just finding a name of an organization. You need to do your homework. You need to find out what the foundation actually funds, the type of proposal they want you to use, because the fact is that, like, for instance, we didn't take the general one that is used by New York State. We had a very specific proposal. And you have to really answer the questions and not just put in the proposal that you have developed that, don't use the same proposal for every foundation. And you also need to learn about how to approach a foundation. Some like to be called up, others do not. So every foundation has a different way, but it's important to, use as many resources as possible, to figure out where to go and who to go, go ask funding for.
Jay, may I add a little bit?
Oh, absolutely, Esther.
A little bit of my 2 cents as always, right? I think over here is where you have to think about mission and strategic alignment is very important, right? There are many people on the landscape. There are many organizations in your landscape, but identifying those that most speak to your mission is key here, in understanding that that's where it starts, right? You would rarely, and I'm saying this in full confidence, you're not looking to get a yes for resources, financial resources per se, in your initial contact in building a relationship. Money is not the front end. It's really strategic alignment. The money piece, and I'm going to say it just like that, is what comes out of the relationship building and the alignment of the two organizations. And so knowing the landscape is very, very important, and understanding that, again, leveraging resources matter, and knowing which funder to go to for a certain mission that you're trying to accomplish, or strategic alignment that you're trying to accomplish. And so that is the key space that you should start off with, is understanding your own organization's mission and strategic alignment. Because when you go to seek funding, whether it's public or private, the alignment is there, and you're building that relationship for it to turn into a grant along the way, because the alignment is talked about, the conversations are being had. So again, what's coming out is, you may know the John R. Oishei Foundation through Esther, but there are opportunities to also connect with other strategic foundation partners and public funders that are able to still meet that mission. So all of us, public, private, and organization, are working towards that strategy or that mission for our community at large.
Esther, that is a phenomenal way to phrase that. And Michelle, as a program officer for ESL, can I ask you to talk about the importance of collaboration?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not a program officer. We made the distinct decision to, we are relationship managers. That's our title. And it's, a small, but for us meaningful transition from, we are not policing, or we are not the officer of your program. We are a partner. And so, and you said, be honest and build trust. And I think, we as funders have to do that as well. We use collective impact, the model, quite often. That's sort of one of the linchpins of our theory of change. And collective impact moves at the speed of trust. And that's on every piece, right? We all know the ups and downs of what funders have done, the power dynamic, that funders, you know, may included in a past life. Like, we know those funder dynamics. So I think when building a relationship with a foundation, acknowledging that power dynamic up front, and really, you know, having those open, honest, candid conversations for us is important on, you know, what role should we be playing? What role are you playing? How best can we come into this space, and really being invited and having that very strategic conversation of, you know, what role are we playing here? Funder? Is it convener? Is it neutral table to pull people together? Is it advocate? You know, how do you want us to be in your space? Because you are really the experts of your world, and we're one tool to help get it done, but it's not just funding. So building those trusts, understanding those power dynamics, and I would go back to Holly, you mentioning sharing with the community. For us, communication is key, but it's more important for communication out to the community and to the stakeholders and to the other partners than it is to us. I mean, I live in the world of philanthropy, but you know, there's 900 employees here and they're all bankers. They don't care what the report says. You know, our goal is that information that you've gathered, those lessons learned, whether they're good or bad, are shared with the community so that that continuous improvement process is shared for our entire community and not just your organization and not just the file cabinet of a funder, right? So I would say building a relationship, trust, power dynamics, communication, and share, and that continuous improvement, and then inviting us to a table in the way that's going to be the most helpful for you.
Ann, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that is really important. One of the things that I felt was to make the final report that people really learned from, you know, asking questions that was going to stimulate their thinking about what went well and what didn't go well. And that, you know, also my job when I visited the program was, you know, a lot of times people didn't have a clue what literacy meant. And so I'd go in and say, you know, you're already doing a lot of literacy here. Let me tell you what you might include in your proposal. So I also helped people. Sometimes an organization approached us and their proposal was really not very good. And so I would help them develop a better proposal so that then they could, you know, build into developing better proposals for future, you know, getting future grants.
Well, I appreciate that, Ann, and I appreciate you, Michelle, really talking about the relationships there with and maintaining the relationship with the foundation. And it's about that open information share. And then I had mentally kind of jumped to the next question already when you guys were talking through, and probably wanted to ask you about then the importance of just collaboration as a whole. So we've talked a little about collaboration in the community. A lot of the Wallace Foundation work seems to be about convening. Can you talk about collaboration as an important part of applications and what you look for in applications when it comes to collaboration? I'm going to want a couple other people to chime in on that point too, I think. So listen for your entry points on Polly's comments here.
I think what we're still on this journey, right? On this journey of it takes more than just one organization doing this work. It takes an alignment of practices across a number of different organizations and different roles and responsibility in terms of who's doing what in a community. I came into this work really early on, and I said from the, I saw from the beginning that the kind of impact that Wallace wanted to make as a foundation and where we saw our grants I mean, we really do look at our grants, at our grants as investments, as funds that you can use to start up, right? We're not going to be the funder who will pay for your ongoing costs, right? We're not going to be that reliable source of funding. And that's why it's important for us as a foundation to also collaborate with our local funders as well. And we've been intentional about at certain parts of how we learn from our initiatives and with our initiative partners. We call our grantees partners. They are our partners in implementing this work. We don't have the expertise that they have. They teach us, right? It's their job. We provide supports, we provide funding. We provide, whatever technical assistance, supports they need, we provide that. What's really interesting, what Michelle offered earlier in terms of, am I a convener? What is the role I'm being asked to play given that I'm a foundation? What is the role? I think Wallace, our sort of four nouns would be, we are a research evaluator, communicator. We do some publishing of those lessons, a think tank. So we think deeply about this. And we also think what will give us our best sort of return on investment? Where can we reach the most kids who are underserved, urban, but there's also a tremendous amount of rural poverty? And what are the mechanisms we can use to support and reach those children? Right. So, and what better way than to collaborate, right? What better way? And I think we also saw through the ARP Esther funding, there was an impetus for, and there's sort of like a call for districts to collaborate with external partners around summer and after school. We heard that call as our foundation, right? We support in my unit where I work in learning and enrichment. Summer learning, we have a summer learning toolkit. It's called summer toolkit. I'll find the exact URL and I'll post it in the chat. But we do have a range of lessons and tools that are ready to go that you can use as a district to implement your summer learning programming, if that's where you're headed and that you're ready to implement those efforts. So I think collaboration, we look for it in a range of ways, not just in how you prepare your application. We also look for it in who are your funders, who are the organizations you would turn to in your community, who are you working with nationally, locally, region, however what is that makeup? I also look for, are you partnering with your state? Are you an after school provider? And are you partnering with your statewide after school network? Do you even know who they are? And if you don't, you need to connect with them because they should be a resource to you. So, and there are those kinds of things and collaboration also is on a range in terms of, are you meeting with these folks on a weekly basis and intentionally planning, or are you just making sure that you're in their orbit and they're in yours and you know each other, right? So there's also this range. I'll stop there for you all to.
Ann, you have a thought?
I just wanted to add, the Bowne Foundation really worked on bringing people together, because even New York City, you think, oh, people see each other all the time. Programs the staff end up being very isolated. So we had year-long seminars around literacy. We had evaluation institutes where helping people begin to think about how they can assess their work. In addition, I had quarterly networking meetings where I would, through my work with the grantees, certain topics would come up. That'd be, how do we involve parents in our program? And so I would bring in someone who had worked with that, and then people would share and talk and brainstorm. And so programs begin to know each other and then began to think about, maybe we'll collaborate. Can we come visit your program? And so that's the level of collaboration that we really did in our foundation.
And I'd just like to say I'm sorry, go ahead. Esther.
Go ahead.
Michelle, go for it.
You go.
Oh, I defer.
Okay. But then you'll be next. You know, and the collaboration piece isn't just for the programs. We funders have to collaborate better as well, right? So in Monroe County, we have GRASA, the Greater Rochester After School and Summer Alliance. And during COVID, you know, when we didn't know if summer programs could go and everybody was waiting and waiting, this was like 2021, waiting and waiting and waiting. And then we got the go ahead and no programs had funding. We took that opportunity to create a common application of all the out of school time funders for the programs, right? We had talked about this for years. No, my foundation needs this. No, my foundation this. No, we can't use, you know, our own one application. We can't use one report. And the COVID crisis sort of required us to, right? Never waste a crisis. And so now we're in our third year of a funder collaborative through GRASA. And we, you know, is it clunky? Yeah. Is there things that we totally screwed up? Yes. Is there stuff, do the providers love it? Absolutely. Do they keep giving us feedback on the stuff that they hate? Yes. So I would say that it's not just collaboration with the programs, but the funders need to you know, get over ourselves and our, you know, and really hone in on what's going to be best for the providers, the families, and the communities, and stick with it, right? That trust, that honesty, that transparency is needs to go for every sector. And so, you know, encourage funder collaboration in your community.
Esther?
Jay, I would, this is interactive, right? So if you agree with this statement, use your emoji sign and kind of like give a clap, give a thumbs up that you truly believe that not one man can move a mountain, right? And so let me see some stuff going on. Let me see it. I see it, right? And so if you think about it, it takes my effort, it takes your effort, it takes this person's effort. And when we tilt down, it's still going to take all of our efforts to pull it back up. And so there was a question in the chat box that I wanted to like acknowledge through this question too, is that what's one of the strategies to bring information? My answer to that would be stay connected, right, to your program officer, right? Because if a grant is going to be successful, it requires ongoing information. It's not getting the report 6 months later to find out something is not working out, right? It's that ongoing conversation that takes place between grantor partners and being able to say, well, this is not going right as intended from like the get-go, right? And we come up with solutions together to pivot, to restructure, to modify, whatever word you want to use to bring that collaboration and fruition of the grant to be successful. Because every investment requires work on both ends in order to make that investment make impact on any community. So,
and that goes back to trust, right, Esther? You know, we want our partners, our grantees, I love that, calling them partners, to learn, to have that continuous improvement, and nothing's going to go right, exactly right. I mean, that's just not realistic. And so having that iterative conversation and course correcting should be part. Now, not all funders will allow that. So that's where you know, those power dynamic, those grant agreements, all of those tools to understand what is the comfort level of risk from your foundation and your funder, you know, because we have a high level of risk because it's, you know, it's our money. It's not a foundation, you know, like we don't have to do 5%, you know, not gonna.
Yeah.
We have a high level of risk, but not everybody does. So know that about your funder. And then, yeah, please share with us so that we can continuously improve and learn.
I want to bring our initial here discussion to a close with, I'm going to be asking each of you for kind of a golden nugget or one tip. And I'll start off with mine, which is that a lot of times I think, and you may have even come on this call looking for, gosh, what's that one thing, that one secret, that one, and mine is there isn't one, right? Like that you've got, you got to grind and you've got to be real. And what gets funded isn't like a nifty idea. What gets funded is hard work and something of substance and something that's real, and it takes some effort to do that. And so I would say don't be discouraged, and know that there are people that want to see you succeed. So even if you were to reach out to any of the folks on the call here today and they couldn't say, oh, great idea, here's a check right now, they're going to really be interested in you as an authentic person trying to make a difference in your community. And what I think these fine professionals on the call represent is a range of foundations that are looking for real and impactful places to invest. And the return on that investment is the fulfillment of the vision of their foundation, right? So you're looking for that overlap in vision. So again, no easy way to do that. And that said, if you've got any golden nuggets or quick tips that you would give on the call, if you have those ready, it looks like Ann's ready to go first. And it's always good to go first on things like this because somebody can have yours. Good idea.
I thought it would be helpful to sort of focus on the proposal writing part of it. First off, it's really important to do your homework. Know what the foundation actually funds. I can't tell you the number of people who called up and said, what? You don't fund this? And I said, no, we have a very clear focus. We focus on literacy and after-school programming. Not in the school. Anyway, do your homework. The other thing is, I can't tell you the number of people who spelled the foundation's name wrong. And I don't initially, yes, I will go beyond that, but even I didn't work for the Robert Bowne Foundation. Second of all, you really need to have multiple input into your proposal. What I'm saying is you need to have staff look it over. You need to have not just the proposal writer who may not know the program well. It needs to represent what you do at your program and what it is that you're asking funding for. You also have to ask for a realistic budget. It should include, in the best of all worlds, the last thing that sometimes, professional development is so important, and it really keeps staff excited and interested in what they're doing. So, encourage them to do that, and evaluation. That's the other part that I think really needs more funding. So, you can ask for it. They may just say no, but put that as a part of your budget. And also, do not be afraid to approach your program officer and say, this budget is just not working. I need to make some adjustments. That's life. That's what we all go through. So make sure that you do understand that your grant and your proposal, things are going to look different when you actually report in the end.
Thank you. Jay, may I?
Yeah, go right ahead, Esther.
I have two, right? And the first one is build and sustain strong relationships. Stay connected to those foundations that are closest to your mission. There is no need to mission creep, because when you do, you may miss other opportunities that are aligned with your mission. And so be very, very cautious about sustaining and building those strong relationships and staying closest to those foundations that are aligned with your organization as well. And I also encourage, I mean, a lot of what Ann talked about requires you to have that trust in a relationship with your program officer in order to be able to be comfortable with saying this budget doesn't work, right? So I encourage you to also be okay with being uncomfortable with being a teacher to the world of philanthropy as well, because we're all learners in this. And that if we're going to go on the road of trust-based philanthropy, let's add that layer of having trauma-informed philanthropy as we approach this work. And so that is my 2 cents that I have for you in continuing the collaboration that you have with your funding partners.
Esther, that's exactly what I was going to say is, there are a number of foundations who are moving towards trust-based philanthropy. We can send you a link on sort of the premise of it. And so know that. But then also, I think, Esther, what I was going to say is the 80-20 rule. Spend 80% of your time on the 20% of the foundations that have a clear mission fit. Then you can spend 20% of your time on the 80% of the foundations that are going to just give you, small funds or no funds. We often use the example of Wayne Cap, who came to us and asked for $25,000. Again, we're relatively new, right? The foundation, it's 100 years old, but we only rolled out our strategy 4 years ago. So, and moved from $1 million to $27 million, 4 years ago. So we're relatively new. So we didn't know about Jay, let's say Wayne Cap. He asked for $25,000 and the group was like, this is a clear fit for us. So we called and said, we think you should apply for more. And that just started the relationship. And then they got a 6-digit grant, a 6-figure grant. So building those relationships and spending the time. Jay, you want to spend more time with me? He probably doesn't, but anyway, yeah, focus your time.
Thanks, Michelle. Polly, any tips there?
I think my fellow panelists cover so much. My nugget is grow your endurance. You are in development. It is hard. Okay. I've served on a couple of not-for-profit and had to fundraise on their behalf. It takes, yes, I've been in that seat of discomfort. It takes a little bit of guts. It takes a little bit of pushing through that vulnerability. Grow your endurance and don't take it personally when someone says no. And no, as a program officer, it's really painful for me to say no, because I see what great work and how passionate you all are in your efforts and how personally you take it. Don't take it personally when we say no to you. You will find your match. Keep looking, grow your endurance. Don't take it personally. That's my nugget. And thank you all for the fantastic work you're doing.
Well, we know that some folks at this juncture, we shift into Q&A. We know some folks that your lunch hour may be ending and you might need to get back to your day, but we're going to be on for the next half an hour. And the one call is like when you are learning from information, and I'm just going to see if I can go back up to this question to make sure that I ask it correctly. Carrie was asking, and feel free to come off of mute, Carrie, or add more to the chat if I get this wrong. What would you recommend as the best strategy to share information? And where we were in the context of the conversation at that time was like information about your work, information about what you're doing, information about what you're learning as you're implementing. We're doing this great program. Who do we tell? How do we tell? And maybe it's in the funding space, but maybe it's also out in the community. And do you have any communication strategies? And as I stretch that question out just a little bit, oh, great, thanks, I'm getting it. Maybe it's like, can you draw the line between communication and funding sustainability? Is maybe how I'm thinking about that.
I mean, in-person meetings are the gold standard, but I know because we have 6 counties and we have limited staff, we don't do in-person meetings, site visits. We follow the 80-20 rule as well, right? That, our bullseye, strategically aligned folks get everything, my personal number, my whatever, they can have anything they want. And then the B tier, and then the C tier, and the D tier. So in person, and what we also love is in person with other people who want to hear the results, right? Whether it's other funders or other partners that you have. And again, Jay nailed it. We went and he gave us a tour, right? And everyone was there, whether all the partners, and showing us how they were collaborating and sharing.
I was just going to add
Go
on
ahead.
to that.
Yeah, keep
and
going.
say It's really important for well, again, it depends on the foundation, and I want to be clear about that. I'm one of those people that, yes, please call me, but keep me informed so I can get ideas of, like you were suggesting, this might be the perfect, bring a group together where they can share their work so other people can learn from it. That's been always my job, is to make the field better and improve it. And so I want people to share their work, and not just in the final report.
Let's see. Any other thoughts on, Polly? It's a little bit what you kind of mentioned this is like, even like a cohesive, like just part of what Wallace is always doing. Can you talk a little bit about how you learn from grantees and how you're sharing out? And maybe there's even some models that people could learn from you about sharing out in their own community about their work.
I think there are certain organizations nationally that I often turn to, because they've sort of like nailed the strategic communications piece, like that. When you said that, my ears perked up, where they post on their website, things like, we have a dashboard of the number of young people we serve, or the number of employees we have, the expertise of our staff. Like, I look for certain things when I'm doing my own research in terms of looking for grantees. And if you can be very clear about, this is my target demographic that I'm seeking to serve, this is how I'm serving, these are the kinds of services I offer, and these are the kinds of impacts, if you have it. And I understand that gets tricky in terms of outcomes, because it requires a different level of like tracking and data monitoring and those kinds of things. But sometimes you don't even have to go there. You can say, these are the young people we serve, these are the number of employees. I mean, workforce, I know it's an issue across our country, right? I think we all saw that the New York Times article, like a couple of quarters ago, I remember it being published. It's across every sector. So we're paying attention to that. So who your target demographic for serving, who your staff are, how you train it, and how you do continuous improvement. When Michelle said that is, how are you like making sure you reach those students? How are you, I shared the toolkit in the link. How are you recruiting your young people intentionally? How are you building your ability to do equity and to implement those sort of like equitable strategies within your organizations? So now I think that there has been like a shift in terms of what foundations are looking for, whereas the onus is on us right now to reach those young people that have not been historically reached in the past. And now, how do we reach them? How do we reach them intentionally? How do we reach their families and invite them into spaces they have not been typically invited to? So I'll say that and stop there in case my panelists have anything to add.
Polly, I think the only thing I would add here is that I totally 100% agree with dashboards and sharing information, because at times what I have seen is, reports would like have so many words and saying the same things over and over. And I could just, I've been in the other side before, right? And so like to think about what's the quickest way to get the information, to be able to have a dialogue that doesn't have to be read, right? Or have to be you sitting down, writing it. And so that visual, right, as part of your way of conveying information, using that RBA kind of approach is really good, right? Like results-based accountability, when you're thinking about your dashboard, what do you want to show in an artistic form as an update to getting a conversation with your program officer. That does not entail you having to sit and write 3, 4, 5 pages. That takes away from the authentic dialogue that can come out of just one picture, right?
And Esther, I heard you say you have capacity building, and Ann, you mentioned professional development is so important. That if your organization doesn't have that capacity or doesn't have that competency, talk to the funder about including that in your budget, because it is important, and you shouldn't have to do it without knowing how. You're not on your own. We're here, and many funders are adding capacity building and professional development to their allowable expenses.
Yeah, and I just want to add that it's what Polly said. Well, Polly, go right ahead, because you might say what I was about to say. So go ahead, and then I've got my note.
I think pick 3 to 5 things that speaks to the mission of your organization and what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right? Keep it simple. We're not looking for a ton of information. Keep it simple. 3 to 5 things that align with the mission of what you're trying to do. And if it's in a graphic form, even better.
Depth over distance there and clarity. And then that information can become a rallying point. As for the capacity building, like Polly said, like she said, do you know who your after school network is? So the Network for Youth Success, for example, has free trainings, like their JEDI training that they mentioned at the start of this call, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. You may be, wanting to respond to how are you addressing DEI work in your agency. Why, if I can include in my application that we're leveraging free and available resources from the Network for Youth Success, right? That shows that I've got awareness of my field. That shows that I'm connecting with resources that are available to me. And in this case, like in Polly's case, the Wallace Foundation is very familiar with the Network for Youth Success. So they're like, oh, good. I don't know who this Jay guy is, but he obviously is connected to somebody that knows what they're doing. So maybe there's half a chance he knows what he's doing. Or if not, at least I've got a partner in trying to get him on the right track later. So I'm not on my own in this one. So I think that information sharing really is about, if I could say, I think it becomes about community building, about using the information to find out who cares about the same things you care about, who's inspired by what you're doing. And it's a way to rally people together. We've got a few more questions from surveys coming in, and then one from Ashley that I want to get to first, which is, do the requirements for grants depend on what was agreed upon in the grant proposal contract with the foundation? And then are there typically common requirements that, that may be the same? So I think the first one is a pretty straightforward, like, yep, every grant's a little different as far as the requirements. But what do you all on the panel see as common features of those accountability measures? Is there anything that you would say is a common feature?
Jay, in my 3-year tenure, right, what I have really tried to look at is individually. Obviously, like you said, the first question is yes, right? But there's where flexibility comes in how you do the work. And so for each partner that shows up, we create those results and outcomes together. So we're both accountable in getting it to the end, right? And so it will look different from one partner to the next. And there may be some cookie cutters that you may go into a partner with, but it doesn't remain that way based off of what you're seeing this particular organization may need. And so here comes, again, lifting up the spirit of collaboration, the spirit of transparency, and the spirit of trust while you're doing this. And so that would be what, yeah, the answer is yes. And there's also flexibility.
Go ahead, Polly.
I will add to Esther's said it beautifully. I also will say in that flexibility is to Michelle's earlier point about continuous improvement, where you plan, you do the thing that you said you were going to do, and then you learn the thing and you said, oh wait, that thing is not working how we originally planned it. So now we have to go back and revise that plan. But the original, like, master, or, the original sort of like goal of what you wanted to accomplish is still in play, right? It hasn't moved so far afield. I think you have to be careful of that mission drift. When your grant requirements has shifted, like what you originally proposed is so way off from where you originally start, that it start to drift off, then the flexibility starts to like taper off as well. So just watch that, but there is a lot of flexibility, because that's why I offer work plan. And I tell my grantees, the work, we can do a no cost extension if you need more time, or we can make revision that it happens in that quarter instead of this quarter because timing is off, or we can revise that strategy so you can reach kids this way versus that way like you originally planned. So that's the flexibility point I wanted to add to Esther's earlier point.
Great. Ann, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that you need to pay attention to details. For instance, nothing is more frustrating when a grantee sends in the report but doesn't send in the budget, or doesn't have, one of the other parts. So then what do I have to do? I have to spend time calling you up to remind you. And also, if you need an extension, I'd much rather you call me a week or two ahead and say, look, I just cannot do this. And then I can give you an extension. Then I don't have to go through the process of calling. And, make sure that you're taking responsibility for all the parts, and that if you, don't do a rush job, because as I tell people, this report is for you to really look at what you have accomplished and what you haven't, or what didn't quite work and how you might change it. And I want the report to be worthwhile for you as well as for me.
I think in my experience, if I do my reporting correctly, it becomes a potential copy for my next application to
Exactly.
a different funder, or, can you talk about, typically in an application, there is can you talk about some competencies you have in this area? Well, I can pull right from those reports if I've done a good job, and then I'm not going, something's asked here that, Polly, we're kind of right there with this. As you were talking about, hey, we like to fund startups, or we can fund something as a startup. ESL, same way, you don't necessarily have to wait. But the question was, how do you maintain a relationship for a long time? And then how do you know when it's time to part ways? And that was a question in the survey.
It depends on the foundation. The Robert Bowne Foundation, we really developed a relationship with our grantees. We had some grantees for well over 20 years, but they had to take off a couple of years in between. So they could always come back for funding, but they could always then be involved in the technical assistant part of our grant making. And so we really I got to know programs intimately over the years. And I really liked that part of it, but we didn't, but not all foundations do that. A lot of times the foundations are either project-based, meaning you have a project that you're going to accomplish in a year or two, or else, some work. for me, working with, organizations over time allowed me to get to know them and be able to help them even more and, really figure out what's going to help them become all that they're capable to really do their mission.
Well, I appreciate that. And other thoughts on, because what I heard you, Ann, say is that the relationship might not even end, is that it could evolve where you don't
Yes.
need the dollars anymore, but you stay involved in the technical assistance. Or you might even say to a new grantee, if you're trying to figure out how to do this, why don't you go over and check these folks out?
Yes.
Because you might be able to share some learning. Any other thoughts on that evolving relationship?
Yeah, I think that evolving relationship is exactly where we are now. Remember, again, we're only 4 or 5 years old, and we have a couple of multi-year grants because that's what we are trying to do with those priority partners and backbone organizations that are doing collective work. But I'll use the Greece Central School District and their community school project. I mean, not project, their movement towards community school. The relationship was testing out some models, and then they were able to use that work to apply for a COSER grant from BOCES, and now the work that they were doing is now 70% reimbursable from the state. And so now our funding is going to shift into what the COSER doesn't fund. And so that evolving relationship, and I think, Jay's group used some of our funds to test, Medicaid reimbursement on specific pieces. And so now, we're ramping that up. And so it really is, we don't want to be the sole funder of anything. We don't want to be the permanent funder of anything, but we want to, but we want to help you in that sustainability plan and help you think through where can some of that funding come from that's sustainable.
Holly?
I was waiting for Michelle to say the words, we like to see diversified revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
See a mix of revenue streams. And when I mentioned startup, I really meant, just as Michelle described very beautifully, Wallace does not fund startups, right? Let me just clarify that. What we do support, we have a number of tools and resources you could draw from on our Strong Nonprofits website. And they're tested tools in terms of how to build the budget, how to make sure that you create a program-based budget so that your fundraising is aligning with what you're actually spending, and you keep an eye on that and the financial health of your organization. That we see is like, the constant erosion of asking nonprofits to not fully charge their overhead costs, which I think could be an entire webinar in and of itself. Hint, Jay, Allie. So I want to name that and put a pin in that for you all to pay attention to. But when you think about foundation and approaching them for funding, think of them as a one-time funding opportunity. And yes, continue to stay in touch with your program officer, but also knowing that we're also changing, right? Foundations are also changing. We have a length of time that we invest in a given portfolio. We publish the findings, and then we'll stay in a sector, but we'll move on to another round of grantees, and we have a timing and a strategy and an effort where things end, unfortunately. But we can remain in touch because we are people, and we do want to build up those lasting relationships with you all.
And I think it certainly shows your expertise when you can say, here is the assets that we're trying to build in our community, right? And that was intentional, right? We're trying to figure out, and we can do another episode on this, but we as a foundation are trying to get away from, I heard it called poverty pimping, this idea of a problem statement. Why does everything have to be a problem? Like, how do we asset frame our community and talk about opportunities. And so anyway, sidebar. How do you take what it is that you're trying to do in your community and know where the public funding comes from, whether you have it yet or not? If you don't have it, what do you need to do to get there? And if you do have it, where are the holes and where can private philanthropy fill in? I mean, that really is, and in that case, I mean, we have funded, some organizations for our whole history. For only 4 years, our 4-year history.
I think over here where I will add is back to Miss Ann's point in regards to homework doing. Do your homework, right? Because you cannot, just like we talked about, we have limited resources, right? And so when a proposal moves forward from a partner, as a program officer, that's a key question that I know my board is going to ask me.
Mhm.
Right? My board, like there's another layer to this work that we have not touched on yet, is that what happens after it gets to a program officer. And that's the program officer now then has to get that approval from the board. And one of the key questions every time is, what does sustainability look like? And so how are you building sustainability into the fold of that proposal request? Because the revolving door, right, at one point will shut for funding, yet the technical support in seeking and connecting to other funding sources is part of the work that we do also. And so just being mindful when we talk about the asset framing, strength-based, and everything in between, don't open up something to a community, have them get involved without knowing that it's going to be there tomorrow, right? And that's very important.
Well, Esther, right there, and I don't know if there's it's regarding sustainability, and this is a question for the whole panel. Carrie had a question regarding sustainability. Can you talk about 3 building blocks or pillars that you look for? We only have a couple minutes left, so I want to do that, and then maybe if we can get to it, quickly address a double dipping question, and then that'll bring us to a close for our time. But would you say like are 3 big things for sustainability?
Public funding or diversified funding, continuous improvement, a clear plan, and trust, relationship building. How's that? Yeah, that sound good? Okay.
And then what do we get like, and this could, and I'll tell you, as somebody seeking funding, sometimes I will put something in a couple of proposals because I'm like, I've got to find dollars for this and I can't just wait on this one to come in. But what happens if you get them both funded? What do you do? That is a great question. And you like how do you avoid double dipping? What happens if have you ever had that where somebody calls you up and says, hey, thanks for the funding, but how does that go?
Oh, go ahead, Ann.
I mean, I would be very excited for that program.
Me too.
And I would say, look, I have received funding for, from another foundation. Can we think about how we might reorganize the budget or maybe expand, the project? Though some funders might say, well, I don't think so, but I was always open for, sometimes grantees came with one idea and then in a couple of months went, no, this is not what we need the money for. And, or what we want to do is this. And, I was open to that.
Yeah, we encourage you to hedge your bets.
Yep.
So, if you were lucky enough to get multiple funding, yay, I agree. And yeah, we'll figure it out. It is a lot more paperwork for me to have to return, have somebody return money than it is to brainstorm ideas on how to use the money with its original intent.
Right.
Other funding sources matter a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that that is a great way to bring things to a close here. And I hope that you heard over and over again words like relationships, words like trust, words like strategic, words like intent, words like collaboration. And you know that ultimately this stuff is about being real. And it's not like, can we put up some kind of like paper mache structure to sneak money in, because you might get away with it one time, but it won't last a long time. And these folks talk to each other. So, you know, especially in regional areas, the word will get out that, you know, not the best. And a lot of times there's advisory boards too. And the reason that foundations have boards is because the boards are members of their community. So the boards typically know what's going on in the community some too. So what looks to be an impersonal, unguarded grant portal has a lot of people behind it. And this is ultimately always still a people business, and it's about people helping people. So thank you for equitably. Thank you so much, all of you, for all of your time. And this concludes this year's sustainability series, but the resources are available to you at the network's website. And I'll let Allie bring us completely to a close for this series. And we look forward to possibly continuing this next year. And if we do, it'd be great for you to send Allie the topics that you're looking for. And pay attention. We are also working on a new or an updated community partnership guidebook, really especially focused in the after school setting there. So Allie, I'll let you wrap us up.
Thanks, Jay. The best way to give feedback would be to take the survey link that I put into the chat box. There is a spot for you to let us know what other topics you need and what other resources you need on sustainability. We really are working to sustain our sustainability series so that we can continue to bring workshops like this to you all. So I just want to thank you all again. Thank you so much to our fantastic panelists for sharing your expertise with us and letting us in on a few secrets today. So thank you to Ann, Esther, Michelle, and Polly. And thank you again to Jay for moderating today. And thank you to all of you for joining us. We do hope you'll connect with us. Use the resources that are in the chat to see other things that we have to offer. And we hope to connect with you soon. Thank you and have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.